everyone, and welcome to Tome of Uselessness. Dan solo recording here, and I wanted to talk about Send Help, the movie that just came out. It's a 2026 movie by Sam Raimi. There was a few things I was kind of found interesting just before, going into the movie. Was the first that it was a 20th century film, so I was like, oh, okay, so Disney still, wants to keep working with Sam Raimi, and maybe again bring him onto a bigger franchise thing or what have you. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting factor. Also, that he didn't write it. It was written by two other people, Damian Shannon and Mark Swift, who have a few credits on some projects and stuff like that. Like Freddy vs. Jason and some Halloween stuff, but like 4 or 5 movies together. So yeah, I was just kind of, I figured Sam Raimi would have wrote this as well, because he write stuff as well, and it's like a smaller project. But yeah, surprised that he didn't do that. And then I was also surprised that Danny Elfman was back doing the score with Sam Raimi, because I know that they kind of had a falling out at some point, during the Spider-Man project or afterwards. And like the score is very Danny Elfman. It was kind of funny just listening to it in some of the scenes, that it's like, very reminiscent of like Beetlejuice and other things, where it's just like, yeah, if you know his score, you would recognize it immediately as a Danny Elfman score. But yeah, like I said, those were just a few things that I found kind of interesting before I was going into the movie. In particular, the 20th century thing, I was just like, oh, because this doesn't seem like Disney, I guess they're kind of casting about and what have you. And with 20th century, that's, they're the previous Fox brand, so it could be used for other things. But yeah, they haven't really been doing this kind of a thing, so I was just kind of surprised to see it being made by them. But yeah, like I said, directed by Sam Raimi, written by Damian Shannon and Mark Swift. The budget, moderate budget, $40 million. Not too shocking considering the size of the cast and locations that they use, so they could really kind of keep it down. I hope it does well at the box office. I mean, it's such an up and down thing, because even watching this, I could see people not going to the theater to watch it at home in a streaming, eventually on Disney Plus or Hulu or whatever, right? Because it's owned by them. So, yeah, 40 million is pretty doable, but I don't know how big of a worldwide release. I definitely have seen commercials and stuff like that, so there's some money behind it for sure. So I think they're just trying to, go back to a model where something like this could potentially hit, and if they make 100 on it, then great, right? Everyone's happy. Stars Rachel McAdams as Linda Little, Xavier Samuel as Donovan, her boss, and there's some other people in there, Chris Pang and a couple other people and what have you, but the setup is essentially that all those people are gonna go down in a plane crash, and then we're on an island, and it's just the two of them, Rachel McAdams and Xavier, for 90% of the movie. Before getting into it or anything like that, I had a lot of fun with it. I was definitely chuckling and laughing. There's a lot of gallows humor and just off stuff, and with the filmmaking and what have you. There's not a lot of crazy say camera stuff from an Evil Dead or anything like that kind of a thing, but it was just more, yeah, like I said, very humorous in a lot of ways. And it's kind of the premise is that Linda Little is from strategy and planning, an accounting-esque department of a big company, and then Donovan is her boss's son, and her boss, the owner of the company, dies, so he's going to take over. And she was meant to be promoted to a VP position, but he's going to bypass her for his buddy, who, went to the same frat and they golf together and etc. So, it's very tech bro coded and finance bro coded. And then they crash the plane crashes on the way to a meeting. And so then they're just stuck on an island. And it turns out she is a survivor aficionado and has read up on survival techniques and etc. And so she uses her knowledge and skills, whereas he's got nothing, right? He's been living a cushy, rich person life and has, no skills at all when it comes to that. And so that's the fun of the movie, is that he's just all bluster but has ultimately no skills or anything like that until he learns from her. And so yeah, it's just a lot of back and forth of like that between them. If their performances, didn't work, or the chemistry and the just the back and forth failed, then the movie would fail ultimately, right? Because like I said, it's just the two of them for most of the movie. But I think it really worked. Their back and forth and charisma and stuff like that was just a lot of fun to see in just, all sorts of different situations. But yeah, just a little rewind. Like I said, they crash land on the plane. He's injured, and she, takes care of him, builds a shelter, builds a fire, and gets everything going. And eventually he's kind of like, well, we got to try to get rescued and this and that. And she's just like, well, maybe it's not the best plan right now. You're still injured, etc. And then so that becomes kind of a tension in the movie, is just kind of like, how much more does this kind of keep going on? Like, he wants to get out of there, and she's kind of like, well, we're doing all right, kind of thing for much of the movie. And then it was really interesting in the story progression, because at a point, she's making, fermented banana fruit wine kind of a thing. So they kind of get drunk, and then there's some reveals. And so they sort of humanize like both of them even more, because initially we're all like with Linda Little, right? Like, because she's getting screwed over by this, by the system and all these kinds of things. And then it's kind of like, oh, okay, so there's a little more humanistic stuff going on with the tech bro, and yeah, like it just kind of helps in the entire story at the end, which I'll get to. I'll give a spoiler warning. But the funniest thing for me was watching it the whole time. Like I said, it's the two of them on the island. She's been exploring. She's looking around. He kind of eventually can start exploring and stuff like that. And I fully expected the entire time that there would be like another twist where, there's like cannibals on the island or just something. Like she hunts and kills a boar, fully CG boar, which they did the best they could. You could tell it's a CG boar. That's fine. But yeah, like I fully expected the entire time that there would be another like layer, and it's almost like another twist that there wasn't another layer. It's like, no, it was just the two of them on this island. Like, again, I'll give some spoilers later, but I just thought that was kind of funny. The entire time while I'm watching it, I was just kind of like, okay, what's the next shoe to drop kind of a thing, but it wasn't. Yeah, it was about 2 hours long, well paced. There was some odd like fade to blacks, just like more than like you would expect almost in conventional filmmaking, especially these days, where it'd just be like, look at something and then like fade to black, and it's like, what? That's kind of weird. And then again, it would, later there's a couple of them where they do some flashback reveals, but still just like the fade to blacks were just it was kind of a noticeable thing where I was kind of like, wow, it's an odd choice, but it's just kind of what they did. Just something that's kind of stood out to me. Rachel McAdams, sorry, and a lot of I think her Linda Little is very much channeling like a Frances McDormand, like Fargo-esque character, at least in some of the line readings and some of like the facial expressions and stuff like that. I don't know, I was just kind of getting that vibe from her, because especially in the beginning of the movie, she's very much like a people pleaser, and she's just trying to do a good job, and she's like, yeah, for the team and etc. And then even as the movie goes on, again, she still has like that attitude. And so yeah, just kind of it came a little bit off like that to me. Not a bad thing. Like, Rachel McAdams does a great job in this movie. And yeah, just to repeat again, it's just kind of fun to see this kind of like bro guy get stripped of his power and his bluster, and he's got nothing. And at one point he's kind of like, I'll do this on my own or whatever, and he like sees some sort of moth-esque creature, and he like grabs it and he's like eating it, and it's all gooey, and the wings are falling apart in his mouth, and he's just like bah, bah, bah. And it's kind of fun to just see like a guy like that just being kind of humiliated, where it's like, dude, you do not know what you're doing here. Just admit it. You don't know what's going on. But yeah, that being all said, I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And like it wasn't just me, like it was one of those scenarios where like when Devin and I see a movie and we're the only people laughing at it. No, many people on my screening were laughing along with the jokes and stuff like that as well. So it's not just me being psycho here. I'll talk some spoilers here coming up. Yeah, major spoilers. If you do care, I would stop and then come back. So early in the movie, they've been on the island for a couple weeks, we learn, and she's out foraging and she sees a boat. And she initially is like, oh, runs to go. And then she's like, no, maybe I need more time, kind of a thing. And so she backs off from the rescue, and then it fades to black. And then again, even later in the film, there's a great sequence where Donovan tries to escape. He in secret built like a raft, and then he drugs her and he jumps on the raft and he's all like, triumphant, like, yeah, and just immediately it just gets smashed apart by some waves and stuff like that. It's hilarious. So he's injured again, basically, from that. And Linda Little's like, oh, I feel bad, I'll go find us some good fruit. And so she's on like a further part of the island that we've kind of seen before, and Donovan's fiance comes with a boat with a driver, and she's like, oh my god, I found you, it's incredible, and is Donovan alive, blah blah blah. And she's like, oh yeah, totally, and I'll lead you to him. Like at this point, we've been kind of led through some of the island as well and seen some stuff, and then yeah, she leads her to like a dangerous outcropping, and then her and her guide, like, she falls off, the fiance that is, the guy grabs her, and then it like just fades to black, but it's like, it didn't go well. Which, yeah, later reveals it. She didn't help them out of that scenario. And then in the final confrontation, it turned out that boat that she saw earlier in the movie with like some people on it was actually like caretakers of like a rich billionaire's house, and it's like built on the island. And so she had found the house previously. Yeah, her and Donovan have kind of a final confrontation there, where it doesn't go well in the end for one Donovan. But like I said, the way the movie is constructed is like they're both terrible by this point of the movie, so you're kind of like, yeah, even whoever actually came out on top, you'd be like, yeah, that's I'm happy with that outcome. Or if they like both killed each other in some way, or were injured enough that like like that, or they caused like a house fire and they both couldn't get out or something like that, I would have been fine with all those kinds of outcomes, basically, by this point in the movie, which I kind of appreciated. Like I said, the movie was well made enough, and the characterizations were like just there enough where you were just like, well, either way, I could see it. But in this case, Linda wins out in the day, and then we get like a final kind of reveal where she is playing golf and being interviewed at like a celebrity event, and basically people like the interviewee's like, oh, it's been a year since, or 6 months, or I think it was like a year, like since your rescue from like a plane crash, like how do you feel about your book and blah blah blah. And so it was just kind of, yeah, or she says like, I'm writing a self-help book because like no one's coming to help you. And then the movie like ends or whatever, right? So I really liked it. I had a lot of fun with it. I would recommend watching it. I don't think it's like, you don't need to go see it in like an IMAX or whatever kind of thing. So I think that could potentially hurt its box office. But it was, it was just a kind of a fun communal theater going experience that you would get back in the day, as it were. Noticeable was not a lot of like Sam Raimi camera tricks. I feel like maybe, it's not that kind of a movie, as it were. I was expecting some, especially like in the night scenes, they're in the dark and there's wind and stuff like that, but there wasn't anything like that. I did fully appreciate that we do get like a Sam Raimi witch. Like Rachel McAdams gets her eye injured and her hair, and she's covered in mud, and I was like, yes, Sam Raimi witch, full in effect. So at least he got that in the movie, which I loved, because yeah, she's just running around all crazy at the end. I don't think there's much more to say, otherwise I'll just be kind of repeating myself more. Would recommend the movie. Check it out if you get a chance to, or if you're just feeling something like a little different. And it was, like I said, a breezy 2 hours. But yeah, if you have any questions, comments, topic suggestions, or you want to reach out, tomeofuselessness@gmail.com. It's also our website, Tome of Uselessness, and you can type that into like podcatchers, for episodes, more episodes, and episodes with Devin and I, talking about stuff. And stay safe, and thanks for listening.